diners in that particular restaurant today have no idea that they're literally sitting in the world of history. Not just any old history, of course, history that really changed their world, the world that we live in today. Everybody who was anybody literally came to this particular area. Just off Regent Street, called Beak Street, and all the big hitters, including royals, including the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, all graced those doors. Interesting to think, isn't it? And these doors here, which we're showing you now, which are the delivery doors, were actually originally the stage door of this very infamous club that brought down a government and almost brought down some, shall we say, terrible PR for the British monarchy. As ever, let me explain. Lovely to see you today on a very warm day now here in London. You all right? Keep it all right? Not bad, thank you. Yeah, you know, I know I've often said here on the show recently, we're coming into another election point, and this is the thing, isn't it? You know, you look at those sort of things, and they're very pivotal in moments in history. Now, this particular area of London, way back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, was infamous for all of its nightlife. These little under clubs that, you know, just had names and doors that you knocked on to be given entrance in. You didn't need a card, your face was enough. And particularly if you were a lord, lady or landed gentry, you truly could have the time of your life up until around 3 o'clock in the morning. This was an area that the royal Princess Margaret knew very well, much to the, shall we say, disdain of course, her sister, the Queen. Didn't know what to do with her because every single night Margaret found new ways to entertain herself, but always just skirting on the edges of, shall we say, catastrophe. And this particular club, as I say, really was something of a catastrophe, almost for the British monarchy. You see, Prince Philip had already visited Murray's Club, oh yes, way back in the 1950s, but it really was in the 1960s when it took off, because we mentioned her recently on the show. It all centred upon this woman, Christine Keeler. That's right, along with her beehive blonde friend, Mandy Rice Davies. Now, as many people know who watch the show on a regular basis, I was lucky enough to meet Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davies. In fact, when they launched a musical, Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote a short-lived musical called Stephen Ward, based, of course, on the guy that did all the medical stuff. I don't know what do they call him, pyrocrator or something like that. But that's what he did anyway, you know. Very posh, very expensive, and he was the man that really introduced Christine Keeler to all of those infamous figures. Yes, the Russian spies and all of that other paraphernalia that brought down the government, and in particular this man, John Perfumo. Now, what was interesting, as I say, is anybody who's anybody came through those doors. The likes of Judy Garland, John Wayne, Mickey Rooney, Fred Astaire. Everybody wanted to go into Murray's Club because it was that infamous. Here's the reason why. Admission and membership was strictly controlled and frequented by London gangsters like the Krays. Royalty, as I say, including Princess Margaret, plus the rich and famous who needed somewhere private to let their hair down. Murray's choreographed floor shows with attractive young hostesses wearing elaborate and very revealing costumes. Christine Keeler was a teenage runaway when she arrived in London and found a job there. She was befriended by the resident, regular person, shall we say, Stephen Ward, and she became one of Ward's girls. She was then introduced later to John Perfumo, the Conservative government war minister, and a Russian spy masquerading as a businessman. Within days, Ward began orchestrating meetings between Keeler and both men, and she embarked on clandestine affairs with the spy and the war minister, an arrangement that would prove disastrous for all of them. The Perfumo scandal was unleashed. The story goes concerning Princess Margaret was that there was a raid in the club in the early 1960s, and she was part of that raid. And what was interesting was she refused to leave the club, you know, and the police didn't really know what to do. And then consequently they realised who she was, because at the point, of course, the club's a little bit dark, and this is where the story goes. They realised that this was the Queen's sister. She knew all too well, and this just shows how much times differ, that this couldn't get into the press, it would be bad, and more importantly, there was nobody there taking pictures, so they really didn't have any proof. Eventually, the police officers very nicely, very gently asked Princess Margaret, who, shall we say, was, I love this phrase on the document sheet, slightly refreshed, whether she would like a lift home. She said no need, she had her own car outside. What she meant, of course, was a chauffeur. But it's interesting to see, isn't it, that in these royal scandals, these shocks and all that sort of stuff, everything just goes on. It's a different time. Can you imagine anybody getting away with that now? I mean, when you think about it, and I don't mean this unkindly, but Prince Harry's Nazi uniform straight all over the papers, this would have been a #1 splash, as they said. But because there was a lot more deference and respect and things like that, for not just the royals, but people in society, people who had money, well, things were kept away. Really, times do change, don't they? And really, by the 1970s, Murray's Club seemed very, very dated indeed. After all, there were so many other avenues to explore. Now, back to the royals. As I say, Prince Philip was a frequent guest in the 50s. Apparently, he liked the fact that it was literally in the heart of London, but very discreet. Nobody asked any questions, and certainly there were no photographers, no paparazzi. Princess Margaret did indeed watch and meet Christine Keeler, albeit briefly, all thanks, of course, to Stephen Ward. You see, Stephen Ward moved in very good circles, and it is alleged that he in fact also treated Prince Philip, hence the reason there was that simple connection. Now, if you've seen the movie Scandal or you've read the book about Christine Keeler, there are varying degrees and stories about exactly what went on. But as I often say, when you think about the people just dining in there today, having a burger, having a Coke, enjoying their fries, literally the feet beneath them, the floor beneath them, would have seen some of the most illustrious action with the most famous people breaking the most historical stories that almost brought down the government and some might say the rest of the world. And it literally all happened here, just off a small street, literally off the corner of Regent Street. Now, up until a few years ago, there used to be a wood sign at the back, literally celebrating the fact that Murray's Club existed there. Now it's disappeared, and when I went in to see the owners, they had no idea that it was Murray's Club, or indeed they had no idea about the sign. Proving, of course, that history, time and everything simply moves on. And unless we are here to look back at it, and more importantly, learn from it, everything clearly is lost in the annals of time. Do you remember the Profumo scandal? And do you think you'd now want to come and have a burger inside this restaurant and relive those moments? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.